Okay guys, so we're gonna take a look at the Meltdown vulnerabilities, which is one of the most important and significant CPU vulnerabilities that I've ever, discovered. And this is actually a vulnerability that utilized the design of the CPU cache in order to achieve the attack and stealing information from a non-authorized program. So this is actually the background of the vulnerability, and today we are gonna dig into we're gonna take a look at the fundamental of these vulnerabilities and trying to figure out how does it happen, what is the mechanism behind it, what is the damage that it can create. So this is actually the goal that we are gonna achieve today. But before actually introducing these vulnerabilities, I would like to introduce you into a simple story and simple questions. It is a tricky questions. Probably was used as one of the interview questions of the Microsoft. But we're gonna take a look at these questions now. Okay, so basically the questions is, you got a room. So imagine this is a room, and then we got 3 controls in the room. So this is control 1, or switches 1, or switch 1. Okay, so this is switch 1, and then we got switch 2, as well as the switch 3. And there we are. We got 3 switches, and we also got 3 light bulbs. And this is something like this. Okay, so this is a light bulb 1, this is light bulb 2, and this is light bulb 3. And you are now in this room, and this is you. You have no access to the light bulb outside of the room. You have no information about the light bulb outside of the room. You can control the 3 switches, and then the 3 switches are randomly connected to one of the light bulb outside of the room. So for example, for the first switch, it might be connected to this one, or it might be connected to this one, or it might be connected to this one as well. So you never know until you go outside of the room. So, and you're now in this room. You only have one chance to go outside of the room, but you have to figure out which switch is associated with which light bulb, and you're only allowed to go outside of the room once only. And so this is the questions. Okay, so let's take a moment to think about how to solve this problem. Okay. At the first glance, the problem seems impossible to be solved. And why is that? You probably have already noticed that for 3 light bulbs, in the conditions of an In the conditions of on and off only, it must be having two light bulbs that are actually in the same state, right? It can either be on and off. It can, let's list out of the possible situations, okay? It might be it might be off, on. It might be on, off. It might be on, off, on. It might be off, on, right? This is probably all of these combinations that we can get, and you will always see that you must have two conditions. You must have two light bulbs that are in the same condition, and this is inevitable because there are not enough status available. So the key to solve this problem is that can you create another status that is other than on and off, right? Other status. So this is the status 1, and now you have to have another status which is called status 2. And what is that? Right? You gotta be creating, or you gotta be utilizing another status in order to differentiate the 3 light bulbs in the same time, right? Because so if you're thinking the questions in the standard way, in a normal way, that you can never solve this problem, because using one status only is not, it's impossible to figure out the associations of the 3 light bulbs. So status 2 is necessary. And what is the status 2 that you can utilize? For light bulbs, it actually, if you try to think it fundamentally, you're gonna realize that a light bulb, other than generating light, it also generates heat, right? So whatever the light bulb is, it might be LED or or something, it must generate some heat. So heat can actually be your second status. So you can actually utilize the heat as your second status in solving this problem. So here is the solution. The solution is, here's the solution to the problem. So the solution is, firstly, you turn on the first light bulb. So you keep this on. Keep this light bulb on all the time. And then for the second control, I shouldn't circle the light bulb, but the control. So you keep this control on all the time. And then you try to turn this on, turn this switch on, but for 30 minutes. And how about after 30 minutes, you're gonna turn this off. Okay, so this is what you're gonna do for the second switch. Third switch, you're gonna keep this off all the time. So this is what we're gonna do for the third switch. So here's the solution to the problem. So what the effect that you're gonna create is that you're gonna have one light bulb that is on, obviously, and you can immediately differentiate it. And then you're gonna have the second light bulb that is, and you're gonna have two light bulbs that are, okay, so let me say it again, okay? So let's just simply, assume that they're actually connected this way. And then you're gonna have the first light bulb that is on, which can be differentiated immediately, okay? So in the remaining two light bulbs, you're gonna, you cannot differentiate it by their, brightness, because they're both off. But one of them is gonna be warmer than the other one, because it has been turned on for 30 minutes. So one of them is gonna be warmer. So you can actually differentiate the two light bulbs by their temperature. So for the warmer light bulbs, it is actually associated with this control, right? For the cooler light bulb, it is actually associated with this control. So here's the solution to the problem. So the key to the problem is you're not solving the problem directly by the first status, but another status that has been, but you are actually exploring another status that can also be used to solve this problem. So this is actually the story that I would like to, introduce to you. And this is actually inspired by a book. And I'm gonna paste the link to the book, or the name of the book, in the description. Okay, so this is the story that I would like to tell you. And why are we telling this story? You might be wondering, right? And the reason that we are telling this story is that this is actually a very, there is actually a very similar underlying thought about this story as, to our problem. Meltdown vulnerabilities, in the other hand, is actually using a similar techniques to achieve the attack. So it is not actually, it is not actually acquiring the information that is confidential in the CPU directly, but it is actually inferring it by using some other status in the CPU. And the other status that is used in the meltdown vulnerabilities was the CPU cache access time. So the CPU cache access time is the temperature, just like the temperature in this story, in the meltdown vulnerability. And what it happened to the CPU is that, so imagine you got CPU right here, and CPU is actually, divided into zones. So the first one is the standard zone, or actually the user state. Okay, user state. So I just call it user. And the second one is the kernel. Oh, sorry, So the second one is the kernel state. So for the sensitive applications as well as the important applications, just like system process, it must be running on the kernel state. So, system process, it must be running in the kernel, obviously. And for the normal application, it will be ran on the user state. So this is a normal app, and the Meltdown vulnerabilities can manage to access the memory in the kernel from an app that is in the user state. And this is what the Meltdown vulnerability can do, and how it does that. Okay, so we're gonna explain it. Okay, so it turns out that there is a design flaw in the Intel CPU, which does the following, which is when a process trying to access, maybe I should write here, okay? When a process trying to access a memory that is in the kernel, or actually, when a process is trying to access a memory okay, so I think we should explain it this way. Okay, so basically for this Intel CPU is gonna predict some of the actions of the program and trying to execute some of the command in advance, so that the processing speed can be faster when processing some of the when processing the command, and basically just doing calculations faster. So for example, if you're trying to access a memory, when you're trying to access a memory sequentially, the Intel CPU is gonna assume that it's gonna predict the next memory that you're gonna get, you're gonna access to, and then it tries to access that memory first and do the calculation first. So in case that you actually is gonna use that piece of memory, it can be accessed faster because it is cached in CPU. So the thing is, in this memory, it probably has something like this. So okay, it probably has something like this. So you got 4 cells right here. So maybe for the first 3 cells, they are in the user's state. But for the last one there, it is in the kernel state. And your applications is okay, maybe 3 states is too less, there's too few, let's assume that there are 100 cells in between. So so your program is accessing this piece of memory sequentially. It accesses the first one, accesses the second one, third one, fourth one, and then 99th one, and 101 is right here. Okay, so basically you're doing a for loop, a loop to loop through all of the CPU memories, or the loop through all of the memory, and then the CPU is gonna assume that the next one you're gonna access is this one, and it actually gets the information from this piece of memory to a place called CPU cache. And it actually does the same for this memory as well. But they're legitimate, right? For this memory, store accessing these memory and placing them in the CPU cache is actually legitimate, because they are actually belongs to this app, right? But for the last one, it is actually in the kernel state, and you're actually accessing this kernel, the memory, and putting it in the CPU cache as well. And this is not permitted. And CPU are actually pretty smart. They actually knows that, okay, accessing this piece of memory is invalid for you. It shouldn't be returning anything for you. So the CPU can actually, realize the problem afterward. The CPU can actually realize the problem, but it actually realizes the problem afterward. So it actually, it can revert, even though it has, it has executed the predicted action. It can revert the things that it has been done to the memory, but it actually cannot. But it is actually a vulnerability for the Intel CPU that it actually does not clear the cache of this piece of memory. So this piece of memory in the kernel is actually exists in the CPU cache. So you're probably is gonna realize that if the program tries to access this piece of memory, it will be faster than accessing the other piece of memory in the kernel. So let's say there is another piece of memory right here. The access time of this piece of memory is significantly faster than accessing this one, right? So there might be 10 nanoseconds, I guess, and this one is gonna be 1000 nanoseconds. It's way faster because it is cached. So, and the attack is actually utilizing this kind of mechanism that if you have cached something, then you're gonna be able to access this piece of memory way faster. Okay, so here's the thing. here's the thing. So here's the point. In the kernel state, some of the program is actually can be understood by taking a look of the branch. Some of the program in the kernel can actually you can actually understand what branches did they took by taking a look at which memory that they have accessed. So for some program, if you have accessed this piece of memory, it might means that you have ran the branch 1. If you have accessed this piece of memory, it might you probably have executed the branch 2, something like that, and you got something like this. And by utilizing the attack that we've mentioned before, we can actually create an attack like this. So we utilize the mechanism that we've mentioned right here. We try to trick the CPU that about the next cell that we're gonna access, and utilizing its prediction function, and then we try to access the memory that we are not supposed to be accessed. And obviously it is gonna be an invalid access, but because of the predictions mechanism of the CPU, it actually will execute the command to get the memory from the CPU as well as from the memory as well as the cached. So during the process, you can actually measure the time that it used in doing this access. So for example, if you see that by executing this attack for multiple times, you can actually understand you can actually infer the access time of the memory. So it turns out this piece of memory has been accessed in 10 nanoseconds, and this one has been accessed in 1,000 nanoseconds, and this one has been accessed in 1,000 nanoseconds as well. So you can confidently confirm that okay, this one is the memory that the kernel program has been accessed, so it has executed the branch 1. And by doing this, you can actually understand which branch it took in the kernel program, and now you get the sensitive information of the kernel. So this is actually the whole story of the Meltdown vulnerability, and I hope that you enjoy the video. Okay.